Welcome back everyone to this lesson. In this video you're going to start learning about time signatures in more depth, and also why and how values which we just learned in last lesson will fit into this system, which there's actually a mathematical way that this is done. Don't worry, it's not complex math or anything like that, it's just very basic counting. You'll see what I mean here. So the very first thing is that we already know you have time signatures of 4, which we saw in a previous example. I'm going to explain in more depth what that actually means. So we have 4 written at the beginning of a piece of music. Obviously we don't have any notes right here right now, but this is your time signature. You're going to find a time signature no matter what in pretty much every single actual song that you learn. So let's take this time signature apart. There are many time signatures, but we're going to stick with this one. 4. The first important number here is the top one. This tells you how many beats. So time signature is talking about beats, okay? So the top number tells us how many times are we counting per bar. Now we're going to explore what bars are in just a second, but the bottom number tells you the type. That's the type of beat, okay? So the top number is how many beats, and the bottom number is telling you the type of beat. Okay, so let's look at the type of numbers that you can find in the bottom of this sort of fraction shape. So the first type is you have 2, and that's going to be describing a minim, okay? So if you had, for example, 2, that would be 2 minim beats. I'll explain it in more detail. Then you have 4, which is what we see over here, and that is corresponding to a crotchet beat, all right? And the last common one that you'll see is an 8 on the bottom number, and that corresponds to a quaver. So these are figures that you just have to remember. It's very, very easy. 2 in the bottom number will refer to a minim. You have 4, which is crotchet, 8 is a quaver. Now let's look at examples of time signatures that you might find. Let's first start with this 4. This means that you're going to count 4 of crotchet beats. Okay, 4 crotchet beats. And if each crotchet beat is worth 1, then we're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, what if we have maybe a 2/4? All right, that's also something that you can find. Well, that would be 1, 2, 1, 2. Each beat I'm counting is a crotchet beat. Remember this, all right? Well, what if we had 2/2? The actual way you'd name them is 2 or 4, etc. So 2 minim beats, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so each beat I am counting is worth a minim, and I'm counting that twice. So 1, 2, 3, 4. They're 2 separate beats. Now you can also find, quite rarely, but it is something you might encounter, 1, 2, and that's 1, 2, 1, 2. 2 more examples is pretty common as well. You have 3, 4, and that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And the other common one that you can see is 8, 8. So 8 quaver beats, which is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now let's explore what this is actually referring to, because now we can say, all right, we have 4 crotchet beats, but what does that have anything to do with the music itself besides how to count it? This is where bars come in. So I'm going to draw what's called a bar line, and here we have a space. This is called the bar. Now if I have another bar here, this is also a bar. So far we have 2 bars, down space to continue there, but we have 2 bars here. When your time signature is 4, it's telling you that you cannot exceed 4 beats per bar, okay? Now here's where your values information comes in. If we had a semi-brief, okay, in a bar, and that's on an A, it's telling you here, play an A for 4 beats. This would be musically legal, okay? There's nothing wrong with this. This is perfectly fine. Let's go into our second bar, and let's say we had a minim, so far we have 2 beats. Now, a rule of time signature is not only that you have to not exceed 4 beats, but you also can't be any lower than 4 beats. Okay, you must stick to this time signature. Now, can you have empty spaces where you're not playing a note? Of course, those are called rests, which I'll teach you later on. But for now, let's say we have 2 minims. Each minim is worth 2 beats. This means this is correct, okay? But what if this minim was actually a crotchet? We have 1, 2, 3 beats in total in this bar. That would be transgressing this time signature rule, which means there has to be another beat somewhere, which is why you cannot ever find this. If I added, for example, another crotchet there, that would be fine because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, what if I added a third crotchet? This would be wrong because you're exceeding the 4 beats. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can't have that. Well, that means this crotchet would either have to be removed or the bar line would have to shift over. So if I actually remove this bar line here, and I can draw in here, and just continue these on, that would be fine, because now this is in the following bar, and maybe I can have a dotted minim. A dotted minim in this case would be fine, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember that a dotted minim would be worth 3, because the dot next to it tells us we half the minim, and then add it on to what the minim is originally worth, which would be 1 plus 2. Let's say we did not have that extra section, and we only had these 2 bars, and that was the end of the piece. Well, there's actually a way in bar lines to signify an end of the piece, and I'll just remove that for you now. So this is called a double bar line, and it's where you have a much thicker bar line followed by a normal bar line, and that tells the player this is the end of the song. Now just keep in mind that I'm keeping all my notes on A right here just for simplicity's sake, but obviously it does not matter where these notes are, but this is generally how the mathematical system of bars work. Now let's give this a practice for a second, and then we'll move on. Okay, so we're in the bass clef here. Just to mix things up, it doesn't actually make any difference, except by how you read the notes and identifying them. Obviously the values don't change. Then we have a different time signature here of 3, 4. Now, what I'm gonna do is draw in a bunch of notes, and you're going to identify where you're going to place the bar line. This is a very common example or exercise that you find in a lot of workbooks, but it is a very good exercise to change the way that your mind looks at sheet music. Alright, so here I have a bunch of notes focusing here on the values of the notes and the time signature. I want you to pause the video and give a think to where you're going to place the bar lines. And remember, the only purpose of these bar lines is to act as sort of gates to create a space of a bar, and in that bar is where we conform to the time signature. So just pause the video and think about what your answers are, and then come back when you're ready and I'll show you what they are. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is count we have in 3, 4. So we have 3 beats to work with per bar. 1, 2, 3. I cannot have any more than that in a bar, so I'm going to draw a bar line here. 1, 2, 3, because the dotted minim is worth 3 beats, because 1 plus 2, so we're going to add a bar line there, and we have 1, 2, 3, I can add a bar line there as well. So this would be musically correct. The reason we're doing this exercise is because once you start looking at actual sheet music, you're no longer looking at it in the same frame of mind as, okay, I can understand kind of what it's asking me to do. It goes from that point to, I understand why it's notated like this, how it's notated, exactly what it's asking me to do, and I have no problems with that. Because now you're understanding the mechanics of how sheet music is actually working here. So that is how time signatures and bar lines work. Now, when it comes to notation, you're going to find some differences in how things appear. There's not actually any difference in how you play it, it's simply how they appear, and it's a very common misconception that beginners have. The first thing, bar lines in no way do they change how you play the music. It is simply there for a visual cue so that you can follow the music more easily and that there's a mathematical system it follows. It doesn't mean that you stop here. It doesn't mean that you slow down. It doesn't mean you speed up or anything like that. It is just to keep things more organized. So make sure that when we start to play things together with bar lines, that you're not getting confused like that. I've intentionally kept my notes beneath this middle line because you find the change when you go over it. So when you have a note that has a stem, if you go over this middle line, the stem goes down. So I'll show you what that looks like. So this crotchet and this minim both have stems, and because we're past this middle line, we're going to put those stems down. The reason is that if we, for example, put our note over here and we put the stem downwards, that's going to go towards the bass clef, and our information that we're going to eventually have in this middle section is going to be interrupted by the stem. So just for organization, we keep the stem on the right side when they are below this middle line. So just to clarify, you can see that when the stem is going up, it's on the right side, and when it's going down, it is on the left side. There, in no instance is the stem going straight up through the middle. This is also irrespective of the clef that you're in. Treble clef or bass clef, it doesn't matter what this line is called, the fact that it's the middle line is what separates these two changes. Now remember that these are affected by things that have clefs, which is almost every note except the semibreve. Because the semibreve does not have a clef, it does not matter where you place it. It will always, stay the same. But if this is, for example, a minim, that's going to be down, and that would go up. Okay, so number 3, the reason I did not show you any quavers is because they're actually grouped differently. I taught you so far that one singular quaver is worth half a beat, which is obviously true. But if you have more than one quaver together, they're grouped in this way. So if you have 2 quavers next to each other, they're not individual like this. They will always be grouped. Now, if you have 4, they will also all be grouped. Or they might even find it that you have 2 sets of, pairs. Importantly, if you find something in between these 2 groups, they are not going to be joined across. Like, you're not going to find a line that goes like this. You will see them separate. Now, I'm not saying you will never find a quaver, on its own, because that is possible and not as rare as you would think. It depends really on the time signature and how much beats left you have in the bar. But the point is that you will find these groups. It does not change in any way how you play them. It's just a visual guide. We're going to go through some playing techniques when we go through this on the piano. But for now, I just wanted to show you what you might see. Again, these stems are always up here in this example, and this would be if they are below this middle line, so in this section here. If they are above the middle line, they will all be flipped down, okay? So I'm going to give you a bunch of notes, and they're going to be in different places this time, and does not affect their value, so you will just want to pay attention to the time signature. And then we're going to draw in bar lines like we did before. So here are some notes. You can see we have quavers, minims, crotchets, and we're going to add our bar lines. It does not make any difference between how they're grouped or which way they're facing or any sharps or flats. What we're focusing on here is their value. So pause the video and think about where those bar lines will be, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so to add our bar lines, we have 4/4, so we're going to count 4 beats per bar. We have half and half, so that's going to be 1 beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I have a bar line here, and 1/2, 1/2, half, half. So 1 and 1. So this entire row here is going to add up to 2 beats. And then we have 2 beats over here, so there would be a bar line over there, and then the music would continue. I'm going to show you just one more example about how semiquavers are actually grouped into the system, and it's a little different than what you might expect. Alright, so in a very similar sense to quavers, semiquavers also are joined in the same way. We have 2 semiquavers together, they form this shape, and you can see that we have this extra line to symbolize the extra tail when it's on its own. When we have 4 group, it is also the same, and this is not exclusive to even numbers. Of course, you can have odd numbers, you can have groups of 3, you can have groups of 5. It all depends on the key signature and how many spaces you have left in the bar. Again, in the same with quavers, you'll never see semiquavers or quavers overextend past where their value is, particularly when there's something in between that is not in the, you could say, quaver family. Because like I mentioned, you have quavers, semiquavers, very rare that you'll see demi-semiquavers, and you can say that these are part of the quaver family. Crotchets, minims, semibreves, those notes are not part of the quaver family, and therefore you will not see these lines added. Okay, so let's say we have a quaver. If this was a semiquaver, we would have 2 tails. A demi-semiquaver, 3 tails. Hemi-demi-semiquaver, 4 tails. Again, you will pretty much never see this, but I'm trying to explain a concept of these lines when you have group notes. If, for example, we had these as a grouped note, this would symbolize 2 quavers. Then we have 2 semiquavers, 2 demi-semiquavers, hemi-demi-semiquavers. And that's how that works. So that's the reason why we have a semiquaver line similar to the shape of a normal quaver. Before we finish up this lesson, I just want to show you one quick rhythm that you're probably going to encounter soon, is when you have a dotted quaver and then a semiquaver. And so that's what that would look like. It's a pretty common rhythm. Your homework task this lesson is I'm going to give you some notes and you're going to identify where the bar lines will go. Okay, so that's your task. It looks a bit chaotic, but if you count it, you'll be fine. Remember that for this beat here, you have 1 quaver, a semiquaver, and this is also a semiquaver since it's half of a quaver. So that would be worth 1 beat. Besides that, great job today, and I'll see you in the next lesson.